This video is for Economics, Chapter 3, Supply and Demand. Where prices come from. We're going to look at the demand side of the market, then we'll look at the supply side of the market, and then we'll talk about equilibrium. Tablet computers were just 1% of the market in 2006, contrary to Bill Gates' prediction 5 years earlier that they would make up the majority of sales at the time. In April 2010, Steve Jobs introduced the iPad, which was an immediate success. Within a year, iPad 2 experienced similar rapid sales. Intense competition ensued. RIM, or Research in Motion, introduced the BlackBerry Playbook, increasing the available choices in the products and lowering the price to consumers. An inside look on page 92 discusses how tablet producers are concerned about component shortages. Will you buy an iPad or a Samsung Galaxy tablet or any type of tablet? I'm not sure if you have purchased a tablet. I have an iPad 2, I think. I'm not sure which one it is, to be completely honest. But I also have tried, I have a laptop. And although I like my iPad, I don't believe that it is a substitute for a laptop. Although they thought that it would be, I'm not sure that they really got there. 7 months after the iPad was introduced, Samsung introduced the Galaxy. Although at a disadvantage, it could still compete based on price and value. See if you can answer the questions by the end of the chapter. Would you choose to buy a Galaxy tablet if it had a lower price than an iPad? If your income increased, would it affect your decision to buy a tablet? In a perfectly competitive market, it is a market that meets the conditions of many buyers and sellers, number one, all firms selling identical products, number two, and no barriers to enter the marketplace. Apple's is like a perfectly competitive market. So we're going to discuss variables that influence demand. A demand schedule is a table that shows the relationship between a price of a product and the quantity demanded for that product. Quantity demanded is the amount of good or service that a consumer is willing and able to purchase at a given price. It's not just willing, you have to actually be able to purchase it. And the demand curve shows the relationship between price of the product and quantity demanded. Market demand is the demand by all consumers of a given good or service. So we're going to talk about tablets. I liked the old version of these slides because they talked about Red Bull, and I'm a big Red Bull fan. But we're going to talk about tablets today. So at $700 per tablet, there would be 3 million tablets per month demanded, or point right here. At $600 a tablet, the demand per month would go up by 1 million. As the price of the tablet decreases, quantity demanded increases. So when we're looking at supply and demand, price is always on the y-axis, and quantity demanded is always on the x-axis. So you'll need to know the law of demand. Write it down, talk about it, we'll do some activities with it, but the law of demand is the rule that holding everything else constant, when the price of a product falls, the quantity demanded of the product will increase. The quantity demanded of the product will increase. So when the price of the product rises, the quantity demanded of the product will decrease. What explains this? So there's several reasons to explain the law of demand. Number one is the substitution effect. The change in quantity demanded of a good that results in the change in price, making the good more or less expensive relative to other substitutes. Food is an example of this. Let's say, for example, we consider pizza and hamburgers the same. If hamburgers went to $10 for a hamburger, but I could still buy pizza for $1, I probably would buy pizza as a substitution for hamburgers, therefore changing the demand for hamburgers as the price of a different product rises or falls. There's also the income effect. I like to make this the college student effect. The change in quantity demanded for a good that results from the effect of a change in the good's price on the consumer's purchasing power. In college, I ate a lot of ramen noodles. And as my income went up, I stopped buying ramen noodles. Why? Because I could afford to buy something else that I would rather eat than ramen noodles. But in college, That's all I could afford, and we have trade-offs, right? And there's scarcity, so I only have limited money, so I'm eating ramen noodles. I still eat mac and cheese because I like it, not because it was an income choice. Ceteris paribus is the condition that you hold all else equal. In order to compare price and quantity demanded, we must require that the relationship between these two variables, everything else must be held constant. Of course, there's a million things that could change in an economy, but when we're talking about the law of demand and the law of supply, we're talking about holding everything else constant besides price and quantity demanded. So, a shift in a demand curve is an increase or decrease. A movement along the line is an increase or decrease of quantity demanded. If the curve shifts left or right, we'll practice this. If the curve shifts left or right, then what's going to happen is that is an increase or decrease in demand. If we go up and down the same line, that's an increase or decrease in quantity demanded. So let's see. Let's talk about tablets. In demand 1, D1, this is our standard line. If there was an increase in demand, it would shift out or to the right. That would be considered an increase in demand. At the same price, or a higher price, at the same price, the quantity demanded would be more. If there's a decrease in demand, that's a shift inward or left. And that means at the same price, there would be less quantity demanded. Many variables other than price can influence market demand. We will discuss the 5 most important. Income, of course, being number 1. A normal good is a good for which demand increases as income rises and decreases as income falls. I think of restaurants like this. During the recession in 2008, what we would consider mid-range restaurants like the Olive Garden or Ruby Tuesdays or any of those, where it's a sit-down but it's not like a high-end restaurant, those restaurants really suffered. That's because it's a normal good. As income increases, demand increases. As income decreases, demand decreases. An inferior good is a good for which demand increases as income falls. So this reverse is the opposite. As your income gets less, you demand more of this good. I would consider McDonald's potentially one of these. In a recession, McDonald's does really well. Why? Because it's convenient, it's cheap, and it's fast, you know? So McDonald's does well when income goes down in the economy. Are Quiznos sandwiches normal goods and Subway inferior? Subway sandwiches seem to fit the economic definition of an inferior good. This does not mean like inferior quality. It's talking about an inferior good in relationship to the talk of demand. So because demand increases as income falls, well, Quiznos would be a normal good. But remember, inferior goods are not necessarily low quality. They talk about the increase in consumers' demand as their income falls. So the next thing that we talk about is the price of related goods. There's 2 types of related goods. A substitute is something that can be used for the same purpose. A complement is something that's used together. If you eat chips and salsa together, and the price of salsa skyrockets, that's going to change the demand for chips as well, because they're complements. And then taste. These are subjective elements such as ad campaigns to get you to enter into a consumer decision to buy a product. I try to think about fads. There's always fads over a lifetime. What is the most popular thing? My nephew is 3, and Thomas the Train is really, really popular, and specific items become popular. Why? Because of advertising campaigns and TV. I think about Frozen, actually. When I think of this, my niece, who's 3.5 or 4, turning 4, she is obsessed with that movie Frozen, like all other little girls. And they all want to be her, and it's like a trend. Elsa's like the hottest thing. So that changes the demand for specific items. Also the population and demographics. So when it's cold up here in the winter, there's not a huge demand for bathing suits in New England. The other thing I think about is like grits. We don't eat a lot of grits, but in the South here, they do eat a lot of grits. But if you go into the grocery store here, you'll probably find rice and beans or some other ethnic foods that would relate to the people and demographics in our area. And the final item is expected future prices. Consumers choose not only which products to buy, but also when to buy them. It's like waiting for Black Friday. If you expect the price to go down, you're going to hold off, which decreases demand today and increases it on Black Friday. So we're talking about the demand for healthcare as the baby boomer generation is rising. What will be the effect of the aging population? Older people will have greater demand for healthcare, but less demand for cars than younger people do. Aging baby boomers will also have an effect on the housing market. So let's talk about this. If there's an increase in income and the good is normal, demand curve will shift to the right. That is because consumers spend more of their higher incomes on the good. If there's an increase in income and the demand is an inferior good, it means it will shift to the left. Consumers will spend less on their money. Think about not buying ramen noodles when you have more money. If there's an increase in the price of a substitute good, so if hamburgers increase, and this was the demand curve for pizza, it would increase because you would buy less of the hamburgers and more of the pizza. If there's an increase in the price of a complementary good, so if salsa goes up, then the demand will shift left for chips, which is the complement. If there's an increase in the taste for a good, like frozen, consumers are willing to buy a larger quantity of the good at every price. Shift to the right. If there's just a general population increase, that means more goods will be demanded at every price. And if there's an increase in the expected future price, so I think it's going to cost more later, then I'm going to demand more now, today, to avoid paying the higher price, and demand will shift to the right. So we need to be clear about what the difference between a change in demand and a change in quantity demanded. A change in quantity demanded is the moving from point A to point B. Movement on the same curve, up and down, is an increase or decrease in demand. A to B is an increase in quantity. If you went from B to A, that would be a decrease in quantity demanded. Now, a shift in the curve is a change in demand. A shift right would be an increase. To decide what products to develop, firms need to forecast demand for those products. Forecasting demand for a new product can be challenging because it's difficult to gauge how many consumers will find the new product useful. In 2011, Apple forecasted it would sell 40 million iPads. Time will tell whether the future of the iPad tablet is as large as Apple and other firms will be forecasting. They did reach that goal, by the way. So this is an overview of demand. I'm going to make a separate video to overview supply.